for starters, could you just please tell us your name and where you're from and what do you do?
My name is Chris Hill. I'm originally from Macon. I grew up in Millersville, Georgia. I've been living in McDonough, Georgia for the last 10 plus years. I am a bankruptcy paralegal, Marine Corps vet. I'm married with 2 children and a 3%er.
So, how does the 3% relate to the concept love thy neighbor?
I think the 3% and 3%ers as a whole, they relate to the concept of love thy neighbor because the basis of the 3% movement, in my opinion, is to be able to come together and provide food, water, and security for our friends and our neighbors in the event of a crisis, no matter whether it's natural or man-made.
And who are neighbors? What does it mean to be a neighbor?
Neighbors, I look at as being my fellow countrymen. Neighbors are the people that I live in close proximity to, and maybe not so much in close proximity to people in general. I would consider most good people or even bad people or good people that have done bad things to be neighbors. But by and large, I like to think of people as being predominantly good, and thus, my neighbor.
So, what do you think is meant by the term love?
I think love, in my opinion, is a combination of a variety of feelings. That would be compassion, unselfishness, courage, giving, sharing, intimacy. It's like the best thing that we have to offer another human being on this planet, I feel, is love and kindness.
Do you feel a responsibility to love thy neighbor? Why or why not?
Yes, I feel that we have a responsibility to love our neighbor. Can I break?
Sure.
Check. Is that okay.
Don't touch anything. Pause.
You guys good to go? And Chris, you can break anytime you want.
All right,
Yeah,
appreciate it.
Don't feel pressure.
Remember it's recording?
Or if you want to start again, whatever,
Worst
just let us know.
Rolling? Rolling. Okay, I'll just repeat the question if you don't mind. Do you feel a responsibility to love thy neighbor? Why or why not?
I feel like we have a responsibility to love our neighbor. The old saying by Mark Twain is that difference of opinions make horses race. And I'd like to take that to the next level and say that we are reconciled with God through the life and death and resurrection of Jesus Christ, and we're also reconciled with each other through the Holy Spirit.
And can you tell us of a time when you all acted in a way that you believe represents love thy neighbor?
Yeah, there are several instances where I feel like we've acted under that umbrella of loving our neighbor with regards to 3% Security Force and what we've done. More recently, there were several tragedies. One here in Georgia where a tornado struck South Georgia. We provided a humanitarian mission to Georgia to provide food, water, goods to the people that were affected by that storm. It was a very, very good feeling, very noble feeling. A bigger event would have been the Gatlinburg, Tennessee fires and Pigeon Forge, where tens of thousands of people were rendered homeless from the fire. We were able to, on very short notice, roughly 72 hours, have 60 vehicles and trailers en route to Pigeon Forge, spanning from Georgia all the way to North Dakota. And we were able to drop off those supplies to the National Guard in Pigeon Forge, and the gratitude, the thanks that we received from the people in Pigeon Forge was overwhelming and heartwarming. We all came away from that, feeling better about not only ourselves and being able to do something good for other people in a time of need, but we were also able to donate a vehicle for a veteran who had lost everything in the fire. So, that was a great feeling. and we came away from that feeling that it only takes a couple of good people with good intentions, and you can make good things happen. We've participated in a limited scope during the Oregon Malheur refuge standoff, and I think a good message that people should look into and research would be the life and death of Lavoy Finicum, who was the person who lost his life during that redress of grievances and peaceful protest. Robert Lavoy Finicum had a profound understanding of freedom, and was believed that there are a few things that people should give their lives in defense of, and freedom being one of them. He was instrumental in bringing awareness to a lot of the situations that we see currently in politics with regards to Russia, Uranium One, the selling of our minerals underneath our feet to foreign governments, and pushing ranchers off of their land so that they can't provide for their own families, government overreach, just a whole lot of inequities that was being addressed during that time. And he was en route to meet with a constitutionally friendly sheriff, and lost his life in that transit from point A to point B. And I think in a final act of love, when the FBI and Oregon State Police started firing upon his vehicle, rounding the curve, and once he exited the vehicle, he jumped out of the vehicle, moved away from it, put his hands in the air, and directed the fire towards himself and drew the fire away from the people that were still inside the truck. So I think that if there's a modern example of loving thy neighbor, I think Robert Lavoy Finicum would be a shining example of that.
Thank you. How do you all act to defend our constitutional rights for American neighbors?
We're fierce defenders of the Constitution, and we look at the Declaration of Independence, and we see the inequities that are being perpetrated.
I apologize. It would be great if you started by saying as American neighbors, or as for our neighbor Americans, or whatever.
All right.
Just so that because it'll get cut into smaller pieces and make it clear that it's about, this is servicing your community, serving your community. The American community are my neighbors.
All right.
Okay. How do you all act to defend our constitutional rights for American neighbors?
We exercise our rights to defend our. Sorry.
You're good.
Is that a question again?
Oh, how do you all act to defend our constitutional rights for American neighbors?
Ready? We act and defend the rights of our neighbors and under the Constitution by doing a plethora of different things. One would be education. We feel like people need to know their rights and exercise those rights. If you're afraid to exercise those rights, you've already lost that right. We look to educate people on the Constitution. We look to be there to provide security when people are exercising their First Amendment right, a peaceful protest, and having a redress of grievances. And I think our community is instrumental in advocating for positive change. We have to, one, break down certain barriers and stigmas that keep people separated, and do all that we can within our power to bring people together and unite for a common cause, put the politics aside, put the stigmatism aside, and fight for our rights and defend our rights. And I think that we as a civilian militia, it's embedded in the history of the United States of America. I think the communities, by and large, are generally speaking, are divided. I'm looking at it from two sides of the pendulum. One, I feel like racist fires should have been extinguished a long time ago, and the civilian militia should have never been extinguished, or that fire should never have burned out. So we want to do all that we can to reverse that, breathe new life into a constitutional militia, and empower people to learn about their rights and exercise their rights and find out what it really means to have a vested interest or have skin in the game when it comes to defending our constitutional republic, and of course let old racist fires die out. I think that if we're not careful, we're going to have racism outlive the belief of Jesus Christ himself, and it should be unacceptable to anyone living in any community across the spectrum.
So why do you all think it's so important to love thy neighbor?
Let me check.
Chris, you could say, if you wanted, in Matthew, Jesus says it's the second most important commandment after worship God.
Absolutely.
It's not complicated. I'm sorry, I'm giving you.
We're on the same page, no doubt. Let thy neighbor pray for thy enemies. All right.
Okay. Why do you all think it is so important to love thy neighbor?
I think it's important that we love thy neighbor because love promotes peace, and the antithesis of that would be hate, which would just spread fear and destruction. I often ask myself sometimes, am I a human having a spiritual experience, or a spirit having a human experience? I think that in the end I have to do all that I can to promote goodwill and love of thy neighbor, which is Jesus' number one command, loving thy neighbor. I think when it comes to our enemies, we have to pray for our enemies. We have to educate our enemies. But, to an extent, there is a dichotomy, if you will, with it is strictly forbidden in the Christian faith to convert people to the Christian faith by the sword. So I would not advocate that or support that in any way, shape, form, or fashion, no matter the religion. But on the flip side, I do have the right to self-determination, self-preservation. Like, I would not go willingly into the Colosseum and be food for the lions. I think that I am allowed I am allowed to fight for my life, and we as people were made in the image of God, and I think God, I think God as a whole would have no problem with one of his beings doing all that they can to protect and warn other people if danger is coming. And I'm just one of the small group of people that feel like I'm going to do all that I can to be that watchman. I'm going to do all that I can to be my brother's keeper. And I think that if there is more of that inside of our country and inside of our communities, I think in the end we're fighting the good fight, and the outcome will be a lot better. I think speaking in modern terms, people they have less interpersonal relationships with each other. It's been overwhelmed with technology, tweeting, texting, social media, and that's, I feel like, a detriment to the fabric that holds us together. We're so advanced and we're so modern, but if you look at small tribal areas in, say, Africa, and a village, a primitive village, the community is very close knit because they have to depend on each other and they have to get along with each other. And it's, in some ways I'm jealous of that. In some ways, I'd give up modern conveniences to get back to a feeling of community, inside the United States of America.
So, how do you love people who do horrible things?
How do I love people that do horrible things? That's a very tough question. I think, I start with the premise that we have to love our neighbor, but there's also a pendulum in my mind, and somewhere between forgiveness and the damage done, I would do my best as a human to forgive anyone that has transgressed me, and I can't think of a lot of reasons why I would be unable to do that, but one would be murdering or harming another human being. To me, that's unacceptable, and it would be very hard for me as a human to forgive someone who harms thy neighbor. One quote that or verse that I have memorized, I think it's applicable, and it may sound kind of harsh, but I think there's a lot of wisdom to be learned or gained from it. And that is, whoever appeals to the law against their fellow man is either a fool or a coward. Whoever cannot take care of himself without that law is both. For a wounded man will say to his assailant, "If I live, I will kill you. If I die, you are forgiven." Such is the rule of honor. So basically, live and let live. We're free to pursue life, liberty, and happiness, but your rights and your freedoms end when they interfere or obstruct my right to life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness, and we'll defend that fiercely.
Great, thank you. We just have one more question, and do you have anything else that you'd like to add in terms of the 3% and love thy neighbor that we did not ask you?
Only that if we train and prepare for a day that we hope never comes, and if there must be trouble, we say that let it happen in our day, so that our children may live in peace. We are the watchdogs, the guardians, and a lot of people kind of defer that responsibility to military and law enforcement, which is fine. However, I feel like as citizens in the United States of America, it's incumbent upon all of us to have a vested interest in our security and not defer it to anyone else. So anything that I can do personally or anything that our organization can do as a whole to promote that, I feel like it's a cause, it's a just cause, even when the cards are stacked up against us, so to speak, where people who call themselves preppers or constitutional militiamen or whatever the term, 3%ers, whatever the term, they tend to catch flack or resistance from the government, which would be a Department of Homeland Security, labeling these people or us as potentially violent, or Southern Poverty Law Center labeling us as a hate group, or people inside the 3% Patriot movement who have their own ideas about how to go about winning this battle on the political and on the social front. There are it almost scares people into giving up their First Amendment right to exercise, to express themselves freely and to speak freely. I'm just not in that camp. I feel like I got something to say, and if I need to go on top of Stone Mountain and scream it to the world, and you all are free, we are free, we need to come together, put everything aside, and all fight for our constitutional republic, lest we lose it, I'm going to be that guy. And it comes with some resistance, but with the love of my brothers, I gain courage, and we'll continue to do that. So help us God.
I actually have something for you if you feel like answering it. Excuse me. Some of the people that watch this will be conservative Christians, and some of them will be liberal Christians, and some will be from other. There's some Muslims that I expect will watch it and whatnot. So this is an opportunity if you'd like to speak to the media, the mainstream media presents militias as frightening and dangerous, and you don't seem frightening or dangerous to me. You seem like a good guy who is trying to take care of other people. I'm wondering if you might look to the camera and if there's You don't have
Sure.
to do it, but if you feel like it, I think it would be great.
Sure. One point, one more note I would say to media or to anyone watching this film, speaking from a point of view, I am a Marine Corps vet, I am a militiaman, I am a member of the Patriot Movement and the 3% Security Force. And like we were saying earlier, we have to overcome a lot of myths and misconceptions. The people in the Patriot Movement, if they are bona fide constitutionalists, they are not advocating violence towards other human beings. We are, for our all intents and purposes, we're a defensive militia. No matter how the media tries to spin it to say that there's violence or we're advocating open war with the government, all of these negative connotations, they're just lies and nothing more, nothing less. It's just really hard to articulate a message in a 3-minute video. There are so many things that go into our feelings, our beliefs, our morals. Across the board, there's so many issues, there's so many inequities that you just don't have enough time to dispel all the myths and misconceptions in a 3 to 7 minute sound bite. So I would advocate communication, open dialogue. Let's come together and unite and under the Constitution and a spirit of freedom and search for a truth, search for a common ground. There's plenty of common ground that can be reached if we, just sit down at the table and address some of these common fears and myths and if we have the time, given the time, I believe that people that engage in this conversation or engage in this type of dialogue will reach common ground and headway could be made, progress could be made. No doubt in my mind that we can do this. But so when the time is right, I will be here. I'm here to answer any questions, address any concerns, anytime, anywhere, any place. We just need a fair shake, and we don't need sensationalism. We don't need gonzo journalism. We don't need fake news. It's time for the media to be responsible in their reporting of the people that they're reporting about and not interject their biased opinions, put the bias aside, focus on the facts, put emotion to the side, focus on the facts, and be prepared to take your fellow brother at his word, and from there make a well-informed decision. You cannot make a well-informed decision on anything with a 2 to 3 minute soundbite or news article or the news is very fast paced. You're just not going to get all the information, so it's hard. You'll have to do some research, and I totally encourage research. And if you're suffering from cognitive dissonance, maybe talk to somebody about that.
Chris, do you have anything that you'd say to Muslim Americans? I think a thing that's interesting is that some, the translators from Iraq and Afghanistan, some of those folks had to come over here because their families weren't safe in those countries anymore. And I think in that community, they're frightened of the American militias. But looking at you, I don't think they should be frightened of you or of the 3% movement. Do you have anything could you say? And I'd like to speak to Muslim Americans. This is
Sure. If I could take a minute to speak with Muslim Americans, I would like to let you know about a personal mission that I was embarked on, and it was in 1996, Operation Pacific Haven, and the Kurdish refugees in outside of the no-fly zones in Iraq. They were being assaulted by Saddam Hussein's armies. And in order to protect the families, thousands upon thousands of families that were escaping Saddam Hussein, United States Marine Corps, during my time in service, gathered these people up, in the no-fly zones, the people that made it, across the border into the safe zones in these no-fly zones, and we flew them into Guam. We provided food, water, security, protection for thousands upon thousands of Muslims coming into this country, and I participated in that with honor, with pride. I felt like I was doing my duty as an American and as a Marine, to protect these people. We want to protect people from harm. But on the flip side, it's the people that were harming those escaping Saddam Hussein's tyranny that I think that's where the confusion starts to set in. I feel like currently we have ISIS, currently we have Daesh, currently we have global terrorism inside and outside of the United States of America. So my fight personally is with those radical elements, with terrorism, with human beings that would use religious, ideological, and political, use violence to advocate or push for religious, ideological, or political ends. I think that if we live and let live, we have freedom of religion. We're going to get along just fine, and that's a beautiful thing. That's a great thing. However, I'm scared. I'm nervous, and I have to be on guard because we live in a world where not everybody is peace-loving, and we have bad people doing bad things on this planet. And I want to be there to fight, against all injustices or against all violence or terrorism, if and when I can. If the opportunity ever, God forbid it ever happens, but I will fight, against any human being that attempts to kill, maim, bomb, hijack, skyjack, in the name of promoting or under the pretext of promoting their beliefs and pushing their beliefs on other people. That is totally contrary to freedom. So again, if given more time, I think that we could reach a consensus very quickly, very easily. I think that good people do not want to see bad things happen to other good people. And if there are bad people on this planet that are doing these evil acts, then we have a responsibility to protect Americans, to protect people at large inside and outside of the United States of America from this type of violence that is plaguing our planet.